Channel 1 English, channel 1 English, testing 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
I would be most grateful if we could start this plenary session, if you would please take your seats. Thank you very much.
Forum, I would like to thank President Felipe Calderon and his government for hosting us with such a warm hospitality, and also Governor Emilio González Márquez, the government of Jalisco, and the local authorities of Puerto Vallarta for greeting us yesterday with an extraordinary sample of the richness of the Mexican culture. Thanks to our co-chairs and to all of you for joining us at the 7th World Economic Forum on Latin America. We're gathering more than 900 leaders of all walks of life of more than 70 countries, including a significant number of global shapers and a significant number of YGLs, the Young Global Leaders, that was also the largest ever annual summit held since the establishment of that young platform. It concluded yesterday with very successful results. We also held the second Sustainable Growth Summit, which brought yesterday very relevant conclusions on the new energy architecture, on the water and agricultural management, sustainable transportation, and financing for green growth in preparation for the Rio +20 summit. All these meetings have set a record number of participation. This reflects the interest and trust in Latin America at a time of global uncertainty. Latin America's leadership also reflects globally on the Mexican presidency of G20. Since December of last year, we have been collaborating in the G20 process with the government of Mexico through the establishment of 8 task forces related to the B20 on topics that go from food security to green growth, trade and investment, innovation, employment, transparency, financing for development, and advocacy. The preliminary recommendations of this process will be of a very practical nature, and this will be presented to President Calderon this evening. A region of almost 600 million people has a very positive demographics bonus, has vast natural resources, enjoys financial stability, and has maintained sustained growth for the past years. Its projection is of 3.7 for 2012, and it enjoys the lowest levels of poverty in the last 20 years. Yet, there are many challenges of diverse nature, some born within a region, and others from the impact of our current interrelated world. It is our wish that this meeting provides an opportunity to engage in a frank and open dialogue to discuss the region's opportunities and the required transformations in the new global context. Y sobre todo, desearíamos
We would particularly hope that everyone from Latin America once again assume its own individual commitment to be able to ensure a prosperous future for Latin America.
an unquestionable leader who was nominated by the Forum some years ago a global leader of tomorrow. He is now a true, wise global leader of today. President Felipe Calderon, the President of Mexico. Please, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Marisol. Dear Professor Klaus Schwab, it is our honor that you have entrusted Mexico to organize the World Economic Forum on Latin America here in Mexico. I would like to salute Your Excellency Mariano Rajoy, the President of Spain, the European country that is very dear to Latin America, have very strong identity. We're very glad to have you here. I would like to salute Desiree Boutset, President of Suriname, and also the chair of CARICOM. Be welcome, and thank you for representing CARICOM countries here. I would like to salute as well Otto Perez, President of the Sister Republic of Guatemala, also representing Central America, Excellency His Highness Prince Haakon, co-chair of the World Economic Forum. Be welcome. I salute Emilio González Márquez, Governor of the State of Jalisco. Thank you very much for your hospitality.
A lot of reasons, protocols and political and media reasons, but let me extend the most welcome for all of you. Mexico likes to host the people, and it's an honor for us to receive you coming from more than 70 countries around the globe. Como ha dicho,
as Marisol said, we've experienced positively in Latin America this experience, and I will take some time of my presentation to describe the Mexican experience and what we define the pathway into the future. How should our countries respond to such complex challenges presented by the global economy? I'm firmly convinced that this response has to pledge for more trade, for more public and private investment. We have to make a firm commitment towards investment. Therefore, we need certainty, and we need to implement the rule of law fully in our economies. Mexico has opened up its economy. Mexico is experienced in investment, and that has provided us with very positive results. And this is what I would like to share with you, the Mexican experience towards commercial openness. It is true, we've seen a major increase in Latin America economies, but we must be watchful. Growth in some sectors is linked to the high price of commodities is linked to high prices of foodstuffs, soy, wheat, corn, oil. And this is a variable that sometimes is not clearly described. The pathway into the future of Latin America and many other countries is based on trade and investment. These are difficult times. We see this all around the world. We need more trade. We need to incentivize trade, not otherwise. And we have to say no to the temptation of being protectionistic. This is the biggest challenge into the future. Trade creates more competition. Trade gives more importance to users. It makes markets more disciplined, and especially it fights monopolies that sometimes are endemic in our economies. Openness gives way to new technologies, as this is how economies can advance faster, by exchanging technology, moving into open economies. Countries are more productive because industries become more competitive and can step into a globalized world, and therefore macroeconomic stability is reached. How did Mexico manage this situation? Mexico became a fully open economy, amongst other things, through entering into trade agreements. Mexico, in order to be more open in its economy, imposed a tariff reduction with other countries. Even when there was no trade agreement, we had a vigorous campaigns to deregulate certain areas of the company and make way to the opening of new companies. We changed the fiscal structure. We invested in infrastructure, and also we invested in education and technology. I will describe the processes and the results, and briefly allow me to share with you this. With trade openness, we were able to move forward, and we hold the highest number of free trade agreements in the world, 44 FTAs, and by this we have access to a free and tariff-free market of products coming from Mexico that accounts for 1 billion consumers. Additionally, there are some countries that we don't have tariffs. We have reduced average tariffs. I'll share this story with you. In the G20 meetings, all countries, we make a sacrosanct statement, a pledge that is transferred from document to document. It specifies, let's say no to protectionism, let's finish the Doha round and eliminate barriers to trade. And the next day, 15 out of the 20 participants countries decided to set new tariffs, new trade barriers, and new quotas. Amidst a crisis, Mexico decided to do otherwise. We reduced the average tariff quota for imports from 11 to less than 5%, through which our economy became more competitive, and I'll give you some facts momentarily. Please have a look. What happens when an economy becomes open? The most open sectors become the most competitive ones. On this chart, you will be able to see on the horizontal axis how tariffs have seen a reduction in certain sectors in Mexico. To the right, we can see low tariffs reaching zero in some occasions, and in the vertical axis, we've seen the growth between 2003 and 2007. You can clearly see a correlation between the most open sectors. These are the sectors that have shown a highest growth: manufacturing, metal products, transportation, mechanisms, vehicles. Mexico is the 5th top exporter of vehicles in the world, and we're going to move ahead on that list, and we might get to the 4th rank. And the most protected products in Mexico are the ones that show the least growth: garments, shoes, and the editorial industry, and many other agricultural products. What is the reason? The key, my friends, is that amidst globalization, international trade is fundamentally a a middle products market. It's not an end product market that accounts for 20% of trade. Is not based on capital products that represent 10% trade. 70% of global trade is based on mid products. The state of Jalisco, where we are right now, produces 65% of all blackberries available in the world. But to make that possible, Blackberry Guadalajara needs to have access to the best and the cheapest inputs in the world. Circuits, LCDs, electronic devices, and the same for vehicles. Honda has facilities in Guanajuato, GM has a manufacturing facility as well, and commercial openness allows you to create productive chains, and local producers become the ones who have access to the best products in the world, and in the end of the chain end up being more competitive and with the highest level of experts. Yes, we as well receive more imports as being open, but there is a misunderstanding that we see that imports impoverish local industries. Let me tell you that open trade bolsters local industries through imports. Once again, let's go to the chart on the horizontal axis. We see the volume of imports of mid products. As you can see, we have seen an increase of mid products, but in the vertical axis, we've seen an increase of exports in Mexico, and that shows what the old trade theory said. The more openness, the more trade will happen, and importers and exporters will benefit from the situation. In the area of reforms, we have deregulation. We have eliminated in our government 16,000 rules, paperwork, official letters, notifications, standards, and we have reduced remarkably the burden over products. This is a very important reform. We have created an expedite process to constitute a company in Mexico. At least in Mexico, before my administration, you had to go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to request an authorization. Then you had to go to the Ministry of Trade, and then to the Ministry of Finance, then to the Social Security Institute to register workers. That took more than 60 days to set up a company. Today, paperwork is reduced to one single paperwork that you can do from your computer and just having the backup of an accountant. And we have been able to reduce the time it takes to set up a company, and this is one of the elements that has helped us to advance competitiveness indicators. On the other hand, in terms of macroeconomic stability, we have been firm despite criticism. For example, we have been able to maintain low inflation rates. We have the lowest in Latin America and account for 3%, the lowest in Mexico, in spite of high prices for commodities and raw materials. Besides, macroeconomic stability can be translated that in spite of the crisis, when we underwent critical moments, we have to use counter-cyclical expenditures. We have to reduce the deficit, and now it reaches 0.4 of our GDP, less than a half percentage point, even considering investments in PMEX, which is not included in the budget. The public deficit reaches 1.5%. This is a total figure. The Mexican public debt, foreign and domestic debt, accounts only 33% of the GDP. That's the GDP debt ratio. And it also provides enormous credibility advances. We just placed a bond. We did this last year for $1 billion to a 100-year term at a 7% rate. And we've just placed $3 billion at less than 4% in the world markets to a 10-year term. We have international reserves that account for $150 billion and an agreement with the IMF to back up 700 more, and we are solid in our economy due to that. And we have invested as well in our infrastructure. The average of investment in OECD countries is 3.4%. So we have increased public-private investments to 5% from 3.4 to 5%, and this represents major progress in many areas. Please have a look at the column for highways. During this administration, we have built and rebuilt 19,000 kilometers of roads and highways that equal more than all the roads and highways that were built during the previous two administrations. And the same for the building of airports and other infrastructure sectors. Another factor that I would like to know is to invest in engineering, to invest in middle education and higher education. We have invested in 105 new universities. We have refurbished 50 new campuses, and the private sector, for example, the Tecnológico de Monterrey University, has helped us to have in Mexico more than 120,000 engineers graduating from college, and that strengthens our industry's capabilities. We have more engineers than Germany, the UK, and Brazil, and they have twice as double the population of Mexico, more than Italy, Colombia, Chile, and Argentina. 120,000 engineers who are bolstering the manufacturing sector in Mexico. Today, for example, before we were a country that manufactured products, now we want more talent in our country. In Querétaro State, we have an aerospatial university, and individuals who graduate from that university, they are designing the General Electric engine for Airbus 380. It's being designed by engineers in Mexico. What are the results of this effort? It has provided us with more competitiveness, more exports. We have been able to design high-value products, and we hold a higher market share in the U.S. In terms of competitiveness, we have the World Bank facts in its doing business indicator. Mexico used to rank 73 in the year 2006, and it moved up to place 53, a difference of 20 spaces. The World Economic Forum indicator also showed that we have moved up 8 places in the competitiveness ranking. In terms of exports, Mexico has moved forward dramatically. In 1993, at the beginning of NAFTA, we exported $52 billion. Last year, we've closed with $350 billion. $50 billion more compared to the previous year. And also the composition of our exports is key. Back in the 80s, 60% of Mexican exports were oil-driven. Today, we do export oil greatly, but accounts only 16% of our exports. The rest corresponds to goods and services with a higher added value. This is another way to understand how Mexican exports have become more competitive. 6 years ago in the U.S. market, in terms of non-oil U.S. exports, Mexico represented 10.27% of the share. We have moved forward, and we have seen an increase in the number of exports. We also have a greater market share of Mexican products in the United States that reaches 12.6%, and in some occasions we have reached 13%. That is to say that Mexican exports are getting ground vis-a-vis exports coming from other countries in the United States, and this is a fact that Mexico is competitive. If we analyze manufacturing exports from Mexico, this represents 60% of all manufacturing exports in the region. That is to say, Mexican manufacturing products rank higher, are higher than all manufacturing experts in Latin America and the Caribbean together, including Brazil. That is why I agree, dear friends, that what is the takeaway here? In a moment where the global economy is challenged by the global crisis, the right pathway for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I believe that the right pathway for the world, is to have open economies. We have to make a firm commitment towards consumers. They are sensible. We have to understand that globalization represents advantages, and closing the roads down to trade means to close down the road to being more competitive. We are going to have more FTAs, and we have negotiated several, and we still have to do more, and we see an impasse because Mexican imports have to pay tariffs in Brazil, but our purpose was to have a very important FTA with Brazil because these are two large economies that together we will be able to win together. But we need more exchange, and we are building a very powerful Pacific partnership composed by Chile, Peru, and Mexico, and Colombia. And we have as an observer Costa Rica and Panama and other countries, and we're going to create a true free trade area in Latin America and the Pacific. We are trying to be part of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and along with the most powerful Asian economies, we will create a trade area showing high growth rates and the creation of jobs. That's the Mexican perspective. My dear friends, I will wrap up as I started. We are very glad that you are with us in Mexico. This is a country facing issues, facing challenges, of course, but it's doing its best to move forward. A country that, in spite of all its issues, shows a growth of 4%. Mexico is a country that every month has created more than 100,000 formal jobs a month. It shows a very low inflation rate, and it has managed to have universal health coverage for all its people, and it's working on opportunities for the future. We are facing our challenges. We're building new institutions and stronger institutions that in the future will provide us the rule of law that we want. Institutions in the area of security that will help us solve old problems. Mexico is very glad to have you here, and we welcome you with open arms. We have made all the preparation to have you feel comfortable. We have tuned up the weather so you can have the best of times, and I hope that you enjoy your stay in Mexico and the hospitality of Mexicans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, for such an impressive and inspiring message about Mexico's achievement. I would like now to call on the presidents of Guatemala, President of Suriname and Chair of the CARICOM, and Prime Minister of Spain, Mariano Rajoy, and our Chairman and founder of the World Economic Forum, Professor Klaus Schwab, to join me in the stage. Thank you very much.
Mr. President Calderon, first I would like to really congratulate you for this success story. It shows what can be done if you have a consistent strategic thinking behind your policies. So it was very impressive. Thank you. I also want to thank you, to use this opportunity to thank you and the government of Mexico for your hospitality, for your friendship since so many years, for your partnership. It's such a great pleasure to be here, particularly in this year when you also hold the presidency of the G20, and we will come back in a moment. It gives me very special pleasure to welcome here the President of the Spanish government, Mariano Rajoy. Mr. President, to have you here at such a critical moment shows that we can be confident about your country. And I also have to say, looking at what you have done since you assumed the leadership of your country, it's remarkable. We read in the newspapers usually only the negative things, but we should be aware of the tremendous changes you have already enacted in your country under very difficult circumstances. And we are looking forward, after the panel, to have you more talking about what you are undertaking in Spain to make Spain, and I know you are very committed European also, to make Spain and Europe again a very respected partner on the international scene. I also would like to welcome President Pérez Molina from Guatemala. I know you play a major role also in the discussion on the drug issue, on the security. We will come back just in a moment. And finally, the President of the Republic of Suriname and actually the chair of CARICOM, the Caribbean community. We are very happy to have you here and to integrate you into this panel. Now let me start with a question of actuality. You are the chair, President Calderon, of the G20. What are actually your expectations? And in which way does Mexico want to have its special marks left on the G20 process?
We have some priorities in the G20. The first one is to face and overcome the actual economic situation, to find out a way in which we can collaborate for that. Of course, this is a problem in which the main European economies are involved, and I'm very sure that they are going to find out the solutions to those terrible problems that are facing. In particular, let me express my admiration for the courage and responsibility that the President Rajoy is showing right now, facing the problem he received in Spain, and of course express the Mexican solidarity and understanding with that effort. Probably the point in which we can collaborate chairing the G20 is in a mechanism in which we can put together the efforts coming from the European nations themselves and the efforts that are needed from abroad. In particular, for instance, how to reinforce the IMF and through the IMF and other international financial institutions to be able to collaborate to reinforce the European efforts. Today, there is some kind of debate between European governments and American and Asian governments. And probably what we need is some kind of agreement in which we can get an understanding in Los Cabos to establish the principles of mutual collaboration and mutual responsibility facing these terrible problems. A second priority is regarding international financial institutions. For us, it's a priority that the IMF and other institutions could be able to face the challenges of the present. Probably this week, it will be a new meeting of the financial ministers of the G20 countries, and I hope they can have some clear results regarding this point. The third priority is financial system, not only international institutions, but also banking system. Fortunately, in Latin America, that in most of the countries, that has not been a real problem. In the case in Mexico, the rate of capitalization of the banks on average is over 16%, which is several points above the recommendations of Basilea and others. So we have no problems in that front, but it is clear that a very important part of the actual crisis started in the financial system. And it is crucial for the world that we can establish the rules in order to avoid a new problem in the future coming from the financial sector. But at the same time, another social point very important for us and very linked with this is the social inclusion in finance. So how to get access to financial system for the poor people. This is the third priority. And fourth, security, food security. I'm very sure that the extreme poverty in the world has increased dramatically in the last year due to the prices of food. If you consider that more than 1 billion of people are living with less with $1, and they allocate at least half of their income looking for food, and if the price of food have increased almost double in the last 7 years, you can imagine the impact in poverty. We need to find out solution for that. And finally, green growth. Alternatives in order to face climate change. And mainly, the main effort of Mexico will be to find out a way in which we can close the gap between economic growth and jobs and taking care of environment. We need to fix the dilemma, and if you allow me, the false dilemma in which somebody says, either we tackle poverty or we tackle climate change. Either we preserve and promote growth or we preserve and promote nature. It is possible to preserve growth and nature at the same time, and it is possible to tackle climate change and poverty at the same time. And there are a lot of issues of green growth in which we are involved, and that could be, Professor, some of the contributions of Mexico to the next G20 meeting.
Excellent. And we, many here in the room, of course, as you know, Mr. President, have actively contributed in task forces to bring up ideas, particularly also to one issue which is of particular concern to you, food security, which we have to address urgently. Now, President Rajoy, when you look at Latin America from a European perspective, how do you see Latin America as a potential for Europe, and how do you see the evolution of European-Latin American relations?
Good morning to everybody. Before I answer your question, the question all of you just heard, I would certainly like to express my appreciation for President Calderon for his hospitality. I was able to say this just a few minutes ago in an early morning breakfast that we had, that Mexico and Spain are two countries which are on good terms, and we certainly expect to do a lot of things together in the future. It's certainly an honor, a pleasure for me to be here with you this morning. And once again, I'd like to reiterate my appreciation and certainly all the success stories he has under his administration. And he has just brought up some of them very briefly here this morning. I would also like to express my appreciation to Professor Klaus Schwab for the marvelous effort he has put behind this meeting and has allowed me to be here with all of you. Thank you all for being here as well. And the big question, of course, the question that has been posed to me is how can Latin America consolidate its role as a region of opportunities for European businesses? And for European businesses, I would like to say, and certainly particularly for Spanish companies, I'm the president of Spain, Latin America has always been a huge region of opportunities. I think that Latin America has certainly benefited from the presence of European companies here in Latin America. They are leaders in their own countries. I think the European businesses, Spanish businesses can continue to do this in the future, can bring the know-how, the technology, and the capital that are necessary to improve and modernize infrastructure which is already in place and to add value to the already existing chain of values. And once again, I'd like to be very frank here. I certainly live through this day by day. European businesses, and particularly the ones I know the best, which are the Spanish companies, see in the Latin American countries a permanent destination for their investment, for their activities. And what they most want to see is to do things better, to improve on the already existing situation, and to provide more job opportunities, which in turn will lead to prosperity in the region. Just as is happening around the world today, and I think we all are aware of what's happening, I'd like to add a touch to this with respect to the willingness of Spanish companies to come here to Latin America to create jobs, to look for new opportunities. I think economic uncertainty and all of these periods of crises tend to renovate the demands from certain sectors, the sectors which are most hard put to compete in foreign markets. And I think to really turn around this situation it would be completely pernicious, because it's precisely these that are at the basis of what is happening during the hugest time of growth over the past few decades. At the beginning of this crisis, and I certainly do agree with the words that we have just heard from President Calderon, from the very beginning, the onset of this crisis, Spain has always defended the need to have an international response, one in a decided fashion, and to coordinate with other countries. And the initiatives that have come about under G20, we were in Washington in November of 2008. The principal world economies committed themselves to avoid a whole unfolding of protectionist measures, and I think this has led to good results so far. This has been renovated successively, and it has undoubtedly allowed us to turn around, or to at least deter the negative effects of the economic crisis. I think that we all need to work to maintain this commitment during this year when Mexico is going to preside over the G20 group. And finally, I would like to insist on the benefits that are related to this flow of financial resources as well as direct flows. I would like to insist on this point once again. This has led to growth, and not just of advanced economies, but I think particularly of the emerging economies in Latin America. This impact has been particularly positive over the past few years because the high growth rates are closely linked to the entry of capital, which have allowed the countries to undertake investment projects and to allow for the transfer of technology and know-how. And I think here it's important to highlight the legal, the economic structures which can easily be understood and which are stable in nature. This is very important because this is what leads to really security and allows for more investment. And if I may, at this time, I'd like to say something that I think I have to say, because precisely I am the Prime Minister of Spain, and because I believe in what I'm about to say. I have to say that I am very upset about the decision made by Argentina yesterday. I think really this decision is a negative one for everybody, particularly this company which has been expropriated without any justification whatsoever, nor any economic reason that has been given, because it doesn't really exist. Nothing can explain this turn of events. This breaks with, I think, the good understanding that has always existed between our two countries, and I certainly think this is damaging to Spain and to Argentina as well. I am sorry to have to say this, because what happened certainly affects, and to a considerable degree, the international reputation of Argentina. And I'd like to add something further, and I think it's also an important piece of information. Really, this effort by the Latin America, praiseworthy effort by the Latin American countries to make sure that this region is attractive and safe for international trade, investment, can certainly not be tarnished by these specific measures, by measures that I consider have been very specific points, but that could be mistakenly interpreted as by those who don't know what is really Latin American reality, and could actually damage the whole region, as is happening right now. I am certain that I will work to ensure that this not happen. This would not be fair. To put this in other words, this would be very, very unjust. Once again, what happened yesterday to a Spanish company, someone could imagine that tomorrow this could happen really to any other company that's invested in Latin America. This certainly sets a precedent for a whole series of trade relations in a more and more global economy. And once again, I would like to underscore that the government of Spain will certainly work intensely in these efforts to turn around this effort, to be persevering in our efforts to change the situation. It's not only because of the legitimate interests of the Spanish company, which, just like many other companies, have helped the social and economic development of Argentina. It's not just for this reason, but we're also going to do it because I believe we are defending a model of international relations, trade relations, that are based on mutual respect among countries and legal security as well. I think these are the basis really for development and for the collective well-being. When we defend these principles, as we have already heard, and during this morning, we are certainly defending the well-being of our people, the well-being of individuals, of human beings, their progress, and really their well-being. We're trying to contribute to many people living better, can improve their lot, that will have a dignified life. And these are the values that are in play. These are the values really that are questioned when decisions are made, such as the ones that were made. No matter how you look at it, these are decisions which are very hard to understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Rajoy, for those very necessary and clear statement. Before turning to you, President Perez Molina, President Calderon, since Mexico is also directly involved, because Pemex has quite a stake in the whole operation, would you care to make some comments on this particular situation?
Gracias, Professor Schwab.
Thank you, Professor Schwab. In effect, this is a measure that we sorely regret.
I am fully convinced that the pathway towards economic growth and development, it is not the same pathway towards expropriation. We need more investment. All developing countries, including Latin American countries. We need investment. We need capital. We are labor intensive. We lack capital. We need more investment in a region. And those investments will never come to us if there is no legal certainty and the rule of law. And we also have to base that relationship on friendship, mutual respect, and also the respect of sovereign decisions, including the sovereign decision of the Argentinian government and the Argentinian people. It's based on principles, on lawfulness as well. Because in a globalized world, there was no place for that. And Pemex, for many, many years now, holds shares in Repsol, and with it, it has helped to extend Pemex operations all around the world and also acquired shares in an organization of this nature, and that decision, of course, affects the equity of Mexicans. At a different level, of course, that is not the core issue. But what we want is a Latin America that is prosperous. But we don't want a Latin America trapped in ideological judgments. Latin America has to walk the pathway towards investment and trade.
President Perez Molina, one of the big issues of Latin America is the security question, and your country has been particularly exposed to it. Could you share with us how you can combine economic growth and sustained economic growth and security, the needs for security? What is your experience? What are your expectations for the future?
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, first of all, President Calderon. Congratulations for your words, your intervention, and for being the host of this such important forum. Thank you, Professor Swat, for the invitation and for allowing us to participate in this space. In effect, there is a very close relationship when we talk about investment, growth, economic development, generating job opportunities as they are related to security. Security is, of course, much broader, not just encompassing state security or citizen security or community security, but also in dealing with the topics that President Calderon has already touched on regarding legal certainty, legal security, the security and certainty that investors can have in each country. But I would like to delve directly into the topic that is related to national and community and citizen security, physical security, which of course is something that has affected our region, that in some countries, in point of fact, has been better dealt with resources and has proffered better results. We have had throughout our region significant growth of organized crime. Fortunately, with responsible governments, we have also been able to face these down and bring down the impact. However, in Latin America, as we have seen, this is one of the regions that has the highest murder rate in the world, the highest homicide rate as compared to other continents. Here we have significant efforts that we must exert, and each country is, of course, doing what it can. Mexico has been an example in combating organized crime, and particularly as refers to drug trafficking or narco trafficking in recent years. Now, we must also note that this is something that affects not just one country, but the entire region. We have talked about the ballooning effect. If Mexico is exerting a significant effort, then it scales down and runs down to other countries such as Guatemala, Honduras, where today we can identify that the largest, most significant number of flights that are traced bearing cocaine from the south heading toward the United States are landing at this precise moment in Honduras, no longer in Mexico, no longer in Guatemala as in the past. But Honduras is now the destination of these flights. And then there are other routes that are followed to reach the border of Mexico. We have stemmed from something important here, and that is the manner in which we are facing organized crime, but particularly as refers to narco-trafficking. This is the struggle that has been underway for many years. Let me give you a personal example. 20 years ago, I was the director of intelligence in Guatemala. It was up to me to coordinate work with the American agencies, the United States agencies, to combat drug trafficking. I coordinated with intelligence in Mexico, with intelligence in El Salvador and in Honduras, and we met with great success. We were able to capture and seize many loads of cocaine. We destroyed plantations of marijuana and poppy production. But 20 years after the fact, we also, let me remind you that we captured ringleaders of drug trafficking. But 20 years, I take on the presidency of my country, and I have found that drug trafficking organizations are now larger. They have grown. I find that they are better equipped as refers to arms. Not only are they working exclusively with the trafficking and circulation of drugs, they are now entering other fields such as extortion, kidnapping, robbery, trafficking in persons, trafficking in weapons. And this has now become a much, much larger circle. I have found that there is more corruption fostered by the drug trafficking cartels. And I have found that this comes and has weakened our institutions. So we must rethink our actions. We must reflect on how to do more of the same, or should we think about new things that we can undertake, different things in order to better face the threat of drug trafficking. And I talk about drug trafficking because that is what has a direct effect on us. 40% in Guatemala of criminal actions are linked to drug trafficking. The president of Honduras recently said that 60% of criminal actions in his country are linked to drug trafficking. Therefore, Central America, where drugs are warehoused, drugs are stored, and we are in the middle of countries in the south that produce cocaine and the major consumer that is the United States. And because of this geographical accident of being placed in the middle of consumption and production, we find ourselves in grave circumstances and total lack of security. So now we have to rethink this, and we have to think of another way to deal with this. Those of us who are presidents that are exercising power in our countries and wielding political power should be able to discuss this frankly, which is something that we did at the Summit of the Americas. We brought the topic to the table, and even though it was not directly on the agenda, it was of such grave concern that the heads of state decided not only to broach the subject, but to give it as a mandate of the Secretary of the OAS to analyze this so that other institutions can carry out studies that will enable us to determine what more we can do, what different tacks we can take to combat drug trafficking. So we have discussed this. Much has been said about decriminalizing, about regulating, liberalization, but let's not go to any extreme. Let us not continue just to be strict nor to fully liberalized. We don't want to have it said that drugs can be sold just anywhere. There are other alternatives, a middle road, we might say, that we can face, that we can tackle. And we must not leave by the wayside this battle that has been underway for so many years and that we are willing to continue fighting. But we must also fight for dialogue. The time for discussion and dialogue and reflection has arrived. Let us seek different alternatives, different manners in which we can better face down this combating of drug trafficking. How we can find alternatives and solutions to what we have been doing for 40 years now, and that will enable us as countries in Central America, Guatemala namely, to bring down the levels of violence and lack of security, that will enable us to avoid the fact that investment that might arrive at our country today might have to embed a 6, 8, or 10% into its cost for security, reasons of security. We are exerting our best efforts to bring down the cost of lack of security that investors have to pay for. We are carrying out important reforms, and we are going to continue in this vein so that security and peace can once again reign in our country, in Guatemala and in other Central American countries. President Calderon's efforts heading this country, because everything that we are doing points to the fact that peace and security will bring investment to countries such as ours. So in light of this, so that these investments that we are exerting efforts in an agenda of competition, of competence here, that we want to be strong countries supported by the World Bank, that we might become competitive, that we might be able to offer a better environment for business, an appropriate environment in our countries. And that is what we are fighting for on one hand, to improve the business environment on one hand, and on the other hand, to find a new path to bring down the levels of lack of security and the levels of violence, particularly as refers to drug trafficking. At this important forum, I call on business leaders. I call on the organizations of civil society, grassroots organizations, all of the sectors of the countries. I call on you that we might join efforts, that we might reflect on what more can be done. Because as things stand today, while consumption in the United States is not brought down, while trafficking of weapons from north to south is not brought down, trafficking of dollars from the northern countries to the southern countries, if this continues, it will be very difficult for countries in Central America, such as Guatemala, to be effective in our struggle, in our combat of drug trafficking. And in closing, allow me to say that this is not a unilateral decision. I am well aware of this. This is not a decision that is only something to be taken out by Guatemala to seek other alternatives. This is a call for all countries in the region, and even more than the countries in the region. I would take this opportunity of this forum to call on all the countries around the world that we might discuss this, that we might hold a dialogue and jointly seek out new innovative strategies in order to better face the problems of drugs and drug trafficking, and thus generate more appropriate environment for investment, development, and economic growth. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, President Salinas, you certainly have also something to say related to the security issue. And I just have also to mention, I mean, we all were impressed, and rightly, by the achievements in the economic area, improvement of competitiveness, macroeconomic soundness. But those achievements were made meeting quite some challenges, like the war against drugs, the global recession, the bird flu or the flu epidemics which you had to master. But could you say some words about your, let's say, ideas, what should be done related to the drugs issue?
Bueno, son varias cosas.
A couple of things, Professor. Personally, I'm reluctant to use the term the war on drugs. This was a term coined back during Nixon's administration as an American way of putting it and describes the effort on drugs, and that is the first mistake. The problem that we are living in Latin America is not the issue of drugs in itself in an isolated fashion. We have organized crime into it. Organized crime is 100 years old in many countries, in Italy, the U.S., and many other parts of the world, like Asia. How is organized crime defined? It is an organization that, through violence or threat, aim to take over income from a community, legally or illegally, and what happens in that situation? The ultimate problem for our peoples, and we've seen it for more than 15 years, and Guatemala, Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama, El Salvador, Honduras, and the Caribbean countries are suffering from it as well. Before, organized crime amongst its activities, they only transferred drugs into the United States. That's what they did before, and their business model has been restructured. Now they're trying to take over territories to also distribute drugs in our countries. That's a major structural change because drug exports are a business. They have their own logistics, they transfer volume, and that business is completely different. It's a retailer's business, and it involves many other factors. In the old style, they controlled the route. Now they want to control cities and territories. In the old business model, they only needed a few people to transfer a ton of cocaine. You need drivers and escorts and a contact person transporting that ton of cocaine. But if you want to transfer that same ton of cocaine in San Pedro Sula in Honduras or Veracruz City in Mexico in 1 gram little bags, let's say 1 million bags. That million bags, you would need an unfathomable network of people, bribery involved, and that is affecting our region, and they move outside this region. They extend over territory as any distributor. If you sell chips, soft drinks, or beer, you want to reach the most remote corner, the warehouses, to sell your goods. The difference is that these people have a monopoly. They don't want competitors in their turf, and instead of offering price and quality, they kill each other. And that is basically what is wreaking havoc in this region. What Otto Perez described, it's very important. The old business model was based on leaving drug dealers alone and not mess with them. In this new model, if you let them do their business, it's not that they're using your highway. They have taken over a city, a police force, and the local authorities. And if you allow that to happen, and for many years that was allowed, so these people, they do not only distribute drugs, they own that city. And as any other organization like the mafia back in the 19th century, the local boss starts charging for protection the person owning the gas station, the person selling paint, the bar owner. Of course, the black market will have to pay a fee. If the human traffickers would have to pay, brothels, if stolen goods are sold, well, they would have to pay a fee to the local boss, and that is translated into calamities and kidnappings as well. Mr. Schwab, what am I saying this? Because we're facing a different reality, and what we have to institute are different strategies. Is not only that we have to address drug dealing, the basic premise, and I'll go back to the basic premise, the rule of law. What matters is lawfulness. We need to question ourselves. Who rules? The mayor or the local drug lord? Who rules? The governor or the top person in the mafia? Or who rules in a country? Is it either the president or the Congress, or the rules set by kingpins and drug lords? So organized crime is somehow substituting states. The old theory of law described the state as the monopoly of the law. The state had the monopoly of taxes and the force. So these people arrive in a locality and they impose their own rules through force. They impose their own law, and they also impose fees that are similar to taxes. It's a parallel state. What should we do to solve this problem? We have to work on three main pillars. Even when it sounds a tautology, we have to fight criminals. The big mistake is to let them use their free will. We cannot let them create that expansive wave of violence. We have to combat them, we have to fight against them, and we have to prosecute them. Secondly, we have to build stronger institutions. Our institutions in Latin America are vulnerable tremendously. We have fragile police forces. They are corrupt. They use different weapons. I had a conversation with a governor who asked for help. Then I said, okay, let's clean up the police forces. Let's have a new police. And he said, no, Mr. President, no, we can't do it. Oh, no, because police forces in the capital city, it's a tradition. They only use sticks. They don't use fire weapons. Why? Because we are a very peaceful town. You might be very peaceful, but those guys are not peaceful. We need a different type of police. Probably all police forces only had to work on Fridays and Saturdays, keeping the bar scene calm. But we need to have a reform. We need judges. We need public prosecutors that are stronger to have a more reliable system. And we have to clean up our police forces. That's what we're doing, cleaning up the judges, the public prosecutors, and we're paying them higher wages and providing them with technology. This has been a problem that has been in Mexico present for several decades, and we are going to invest in this somehow, if you allow me to call it a liability, because this is going to be an investment that would see its results in the future. And we're going to have state-of-the-art technology to prosecute criminals. This is what we're doing with the new federal police, with the General Attorney's Office and its structure, and the armed forces as well. We are restructuring the social fabric, because in Latin America the average age is 27 and half the Mexican population is under 26. So these people who want markets, who want clients, well, they convince young people, they make them addicts, they become thugs, they become informants, and before they turn 15, they die on the streets. So we need a very aggressive education policy for middle level, higher education. We need to have more job opportunities for young people, and we need to provide them with opportunities to use their leisure time. I'm sorry for taking more time, Professor Schwab. We have to fight criminals. We have to reform justice enforcement institutions, and we have to fix the social fabric. And regardless of the laws on drugs might be regulated differently. And I agree with Odo. We have to put a stop to the flow coming from above. Well, 15 billion consumers. $15 billion come from the consumption that we see coming from the state. We have seized 140,000 weapons in the last couple of years, and the Americans have to be responsible to find the best alternatives to reduce that flow of weapons. And, well, we would have to see what they want to propose to fix that. But as well, any reform might present benefits, but as well risks that need to be studied. And we could, if we massify the consumption of drugs, that might reduce violence. I doubt it, but probably you could have a state that it's different. I'm not against, but I'm for a debate. In public policies, you have to look for an alternative. But in any case, I'll say again, we need a strategy. We need to fight criminals. We have to reconstruct vulnerable institutions. The weaker a state or a country is, the more aggressive criminals will be. And lastly, we have to reconstruct the social fabric.
I think it was appropriate to devote so much time to this so crucial issue and so much in the mind of particularly the foreign community. Now let me move to another issue which comes up again and again when you talk about Latin America. Is Latin America capable to become really a regional unit? And you, President Butterse, you have your experience as the chairman of CARICOM. What is your opinion? Can Latin America really develop into a region?
Thank you. Also, President Calderon, for giving us this opportunity. Honorable Professor Schwab. Yes, no, we are convinced. One, if you look at the region, is that we have enormous resources. There is enough arable land. There are resources like gold, oil, copper, you just name it, and especially water. And what we think is that we are going in a new dimension. And let me go back and talk about the CARICOM, because CARICOM as a unity, CARICOM depends on two things. One is an economic organization, and second, a political organization. The unity is very, very important. In our portfolio from Suriname, I have youth, sport, gender, and culture in our portfolio. What we try to do is to give a real dimension in the structures that you have. For instance, in the Caribbean, more than 60, let's say 60 to 67% access of youth. So we make structures where youth can be chosen, where you have our regional youth ambassadors, and we train them so that they can become the new leaders. We do enormous research on culture, and nowadays what Suriname has done is to inspire the Caribbean community that through sports you cannot only create a healthy, but you can create a wealthy environment. And this nucleus, when we talk about CARICOM, this nucleus, if you look at in the wider Caribbean and look at in South America, then it's well known that the resources that are here are enormous. And what we have to do is take bold steps. What I mean is that if you know you need a necessary step to take, even if it is unpopular, as leader, you have to take the step. Take the step because for the future, it will beneficiary. So that's why we believe that all the possibilities that we have here and let's say in South America and the wider Caribbean and Latin America, that we don't have to make the same mistakes we've seen our friends made in Europe. And one must take into account that there is a new situation. What I mean, the power shift that's upcoming now with the BRICS countries, with the big economies like Brazil. So what we have to do is not to make the same mistakes as they made in the past. And all the ingredients are here to have a successful story. And we know that, and we are glad that one of our sister nations is now, will be the chair of the G20, and we will give him all support to do what they have to do so that this region can be a model for the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I can only underline, as having grown up as a convinced European just after the war, how important the integration of the youth is if you want to create a regional identity. Whether Europe has made mistakes or not, I'm more optimistic, and we will hear later in just some minutes from President Rajoy how Europe, I think, is capable to master its problems. But before we are listening to you, Mr. President, it has become a tradition to celebrate at the opening session of our regional meetings the social entrepreneurs of the region. It will be a very short celebration of 10 minutes. Afterwards, we come back and we have President Rajoy. This celebration expresses also the fact that we are here not only a business community, but a multi-stakeholder community. And when we discuss economy, we discuss economy in an inclusive sense. We look at economy and society. And for this reason, I'm very happy that there are so many NGOs, societal leaders here among us in this room. And I may now ask Hilde Schwab to come up and to present the Social Entrepreneur Awards. And I may ask the social entrepreneurs already to join me.
President Calderon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, it is always a great pleasure for me to announce the social entrepreneurs who have won an award, Social Entrepreneur of the Year, and especially now in Latin America. The social entrepreneurs and their organizations have started use innovative solutions to address pressing societal problems on issues such as malnutrition, drinking water, employment, health, and environment. They have built financially sustainable business models which already have a wide-scale social impact and can further be replicated, hopefully in collaboration with you. We have 25 social entrepreneurs of the Schwab Foundation community participating in this Latin American summit. The winners we will present today have been chosen from a pool of over 500 candidates who applied to national or regional processes. We particularly like to thank the jury members and our partners for their crucial support in the search and selection process. This year, we also want to highlight the fact that an increasing number of young people are already successful social entrepreneurs. The World Economic Forum started a new community last year, the Global Shapers, which brings together the entrepreneurial youth under 30 years of age and in more than 200 major cities around the world. Of the 13 shapers that are present at this meeting, we want to highlight 2 outstanding social entrepreneurs among them. I would now like to ask all awardees to join me on stage. I will present to you the 6 social entrepreneurs. Martín Andrade, Fundación Mi Parque, from Chile. Martín Andrade founded Mi Parque to improve poorly maintained public spaces in low-income areas. Local families design their community spaces and help build them, which ensures that they feel ownership over its maintenance. To date, Fundación Mi Parque has implemented 53 projects benefiting more than 150,000 people. Martin is a global shaper of the World Economic Forum in the Santiago de Chile hub. Mois Jerem, Enova, Mexico. Mois co-founded Enova, which bridges the digital divide through community-based e-learning centers, featuring advanced technology and well-trained facilitators in low-income neighborhoods. Enova has become the biggest network of computer learning centers in Mexico, with 70 sites and over 235,000 members. Mois is also a global shaper and active in the Mexico City hub. Tomás Sanabria, Maniapure, Venezuela. Tomás Sanabria is a cardiologist and he works in remote areas of Venezuela. He started Maniapure to leverage the power of communications technology for rural patients. Through wireless technologies, rural clinics can connect with specialists in Caracas and other major cities for consultation. As a result, nearly 95% of the patients are treated effectively by local health technicians and do not need to travel to a hospital for special treatment. Gisela Maria Bernardes Solimos, CREN, Brazil. Many organizations who work with severely malnourished children focus on hospitalization, which can disrupt the mother-child relationship. CREN expands the conventional approach to involve the entire family in the diagnostics and treatment process to prevent, preempt, and treat malnutrition. The organization also works with schools to educate communities on nutrition. Its activities have currently benefited over 50,000 children throughout Brazil. Greg van Kirk, Community Enterprise Solutions, Guatemala. Greg, a former investment banker, pioneered the micro-consignment model, which lowers risks for small entrepreneurs to start and run their businesses. Community Enterprise Solutions trains, equips, and supports first-time entrepreneurs to sell products such as efficient cook stoves, reading glasses, water filters in remote villages. Currently, more than 300 small entrepreneurs have sold more than 75,000 products. Philip Wilson, Ecofiltro, Guatemala. More than 1 billion people lack access to safe water source. Philip created Ecofiltro to solve the growing water crisis through simple and affordable in-home water filters. They are environmentally friendly, made from locally sourced materials, including clay and sawdust. Studies confirmed that using the filters reduces gastrointestinal diseases by 50%. Since its founding 6 years ago, Ecofiltro has sold close to 100,000 filters throughout Guatemala. Please join me in congratulating these outstanding individuals for their remarkable work and for being a role model for the younger generation. Congratulations to all of them, and thank you for your applause. Thank you.
May I invite the winners just to come here and to have a picture together with the presidents. Congratulations again. I think it's outstanding to see in Latin America such a great innovative force on the grassroots level. Now we look at Europe, and President Rajoy, you are at the center of the storm to a certain extent. I mentioned before that we should have great admiration, at least I personally have it, for what you have done with courage and the legislation which you already enacted. You have also shown great commitment to Europe. Now, the question everybody has in his mind, is it enough? Can you ensure us, Mr. President? Please. Do you want to talk from here? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, good afternoon. And as I did at the beginning of my first words, I would like to reiterate and express once again my appreciation to President Calderon for the very warm welcome I've been given, and once again the founder and the executive director of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who has asked me if what we're doing in Spain is enough I think I'd have to say yes, it is enough, and I'm going to try to give you my line of reasoning. I'm going to speak about Europe because that is the topic I'm supposed to address, así que, so we will speak about it. Europe, but I will also briefly mention the world situation. I'm going to speak about Spain because that's the country I'm from. And according to what I've heard, we are precisely in the eye of the storm at this particular moment, but I'll also mention Latin America. First of all, I'm going to talk about economics, the economies, and I'd like to begin by making a statement that I think is worth making a statement about because we have to situate ourselves in the present-day reality to be able to make decisions. World economy has not completely recovered from the financial crisis, which began in 2008. In spite of the fact that there has been an improvement in the year 2010 in the world economy, once again in 2011 we saw problems come on the scene once again. And we think we will have a growth rate of 3.5%, which was far below the pre-crisis period. This has been closely related to getting proper macroeconomic policies in place than really a definitive solution to the structural problems which underlie these world economic problems. So once again, there is a great sense of disequilibrium, and I think we're subject to many problems on which have been inherited from the financial crisis and others which are a result of new geopolitical trends which depend a lot on oil prices. Financial markets are not completely back to normal, and they have not really earmarked savings for investment, particularly in developed economies. But this also affects everything that I'm saying. This affects the emerging nations as well. It's within this context that over the past summer, we saw a new increase in tensions in sovereign debts in the Eurozone countries. The response of European authorities, the central bank in Europe intervened in refinancing operations on a long-term basis, fiscal impact, and the programs of profound economic reforms by some of the member states at the beginning allowed us to soften the blow. However, as this situation is really quite fragile, as we've seen in the evolution of the debt market over the past few months. This particularly affects, and particularly now it's affecting Italy and Spain, although other countries could be affected as well. I'm speaking of Spain and Italy, which are only two countries, but two countries which are decidedly trying to undertake profound reforms in their economies. Spain particularly is convinced that in addition to the present-day tensions, the economy really has to be adjusted, it has to be transformed, and has to be more solid in the future and go back to the idea of creating jobs and more stability. However, it's also clear that over the summer, the important economic agents in the Eurozone really have not performed as well. This means that there are more costs of financing in the banking system, less growth, higher costs. So once again, the credit crunch in Europe has situated this economy as part of a recession period where the GDP is 0.5% drop, and it might really go up to 0.7% by the mid-year. The effects of these tensions really are transferred to other regions of the world of a diverse intensity through two main channels: trade, exchanges, and financial relations. Through both of these channels, the most affected economies by what's happening in the Eurozone, and this is, of course, quite logically, the rest of the European economies which do not belong to this particular zone, but which have close relations with us, Asian, Latin America, the United States, for example, have really had a lesser impact. However, and this is good, that sharpening of these tensions in these areas could undoubtedly lead to more severe effects than what we've seen to date. particularly the financial channels, is a very strong channel. It's a very potent channel, and this could affect the emerging economics if we were to see really a sharp change or turnabout in the risk market. I'd like to mention the Latin American economy specifically. According to the forecasts that we've seen, if we look at the growth rate, we expect in 2012, there's a slight change with respect to 2011. So the impact of the Eurozone has only been moderate to date. This is due basically to the financial ties with Latin America and the Eurozone and the composition of the exports to Latin America from a financial point of view. The banks in the Eurozone, particularly the Spanish banks, maintain a high volume of assets in Latin America. These banks are immersed in really deleveraging process. However, this process has not really led to a lot of repercussions in Latin America. The Spanish banks, which is the main presence of Europe in this region, has continued to expand really its business, has lent more credit, etc. Last year, the Santander Bank, which is the leading Spanish bank, gave 18% more credits, 143,000 euros. Latin America is about 41% of Santander's business, and particularly in Brazil with 25 million customers, and in Mexico with 9.3 clients or customers. BBVA, which is the second bank in 2011, if we exclude Mexico, went up by 22.8%, 68.4 million euros in their assets, and it was a leader, BBVA Bancomer, here in Mexico, 74 million, 8.3. Of a more general nature, I'd like to point out that the Spanish banks operate in this region through different affiliates, through different branch offices, and they operate autonomously and they lend locally under these own local management systems. And therefore, the Spanish financial system, which is in place right now, will not damage the branches in this region, and I think will actually have positive repercussions in the area and lead to more credibility. From a commercial point of view, Latin America really doesn't have much of a dependency on exports. The relationships with the old continent, of course, is strong in Spain. Our country is well aware of the dynamic growth and its role in investment, trade, etc., through these exchanges unto themselves, but also because of the transfer of technology, which we think is particularly important in Latin America. It's for these reasons why, as I've already mentioned, Spain firmly defends all of the free trade agreements with the countries of the region in Europe, particularly, especially at a time such as the one we're witnessing at present, and I've already mentioned this, that we don't want to see protectionist policies in place. So once again, I think, trying to respond to the question which has been posed to me, I think that the commitment by Spain in this field certainly has been well matched by a stable, good legal framework in most of the countries of this region. And once again, I'm going to mention two countries, Mexico and Colombia, because I'm traveling to Colombia tomorrow, and I'd like to cite these two cases. Therefore, our companies really are in favor. We believe in Latin American countries, and I've already mentioned, we want to have a presence on the market. We want to contribute to development and to growth in this region, with the only exception, which I think you are aware of. So far, tensions in the area really have spread out to other regions of the world. Once again, I think the uncertainty certainly continues. What we've seen of the perspectives of growth in our countries are certainly a major obstacle for economic growth and growth in other regions. So once again, I think to overcome this situation and to restore trust in economic agents, once again, means that the European Union as a whole, and once again, the European Union taken as a whole, and the member states on an individual basis have to act in a firm and a coordinated fashion in an effort to reestablish once again the discipline of public finance and to get underway these reforms which will increase our competitiveness and the flexibility of our economies. I think this is the only path we can go down to see growth once again and to lead to more job opportunities. And my government is fully convinced of the importance, really, of undertaking the reforms which are necessary, which will allow us to dissipate all of these fears regarding the Spanish economy and once again to go down the path of growth. Our economic strategy is very clear, and it has two cornerstones: fiscal discipline and improvement in really competitiveness and flexibility in the economy. With respect to fiscal discipline, we're certainly aware, we're very aware of the fact of consolidating our accounts at a moment of recession such as the one we are undergoing. And once again, discretionary use of fiscal policy in the past, which really has not had very good effects in the sense of growth, really doesn't leave us any other option but to go down this path to recuperate credibility on a worldwide basis. Once again, we want to have modifications, certain amendments in our legal structure, and we have even amended the Spanish Constitution regarding the budget. We are trying to have the proper legal framework which will allow us to have more stability, and I'm referring to all management, all different types of administrations, including our regions. We have tried to reduce our expenditures, to have more income, and new budgets which will allow us to reduce the deficit to 3% in 2013. The objective is not to have to refinance the Spanish economy, to free resources for the private sector and to readjust our expenditures in accordance with the new economic reality. With respect to flexibility, more competitiveness, we have undertaken important, I think, in-depth reforms which have been put off for many, many years, and I wish we'd seen this before, such as labor reforms, financial reforms. And right now, we're working. We have to make important decisions at the Council of Ministers, which will take place in Madrid this Friday, on reforms in the area of sanitary measures, education, and public services. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know of any government in the Eurozone or outside of the zone in 3 months has been able to take decisions of this nature, such as the ones we have made in Spain, let me know about this. Please inform me of this so that I can do a better job. So no matter what the case might be, I hope that these reforms and any other reforms will allow the Spanish economy to recover its growth rate, macroeconomic stability as in the past. But Spain, once again, certainly has to have enough liquidity which will protect the reforms we hope to undertake in this growing sense of distrust and financial problems. The European Union is working intensely, it certainly is, to have certain mechanisms to have better liquidity. And G20, whose presidency obviously lies in the hands of Mexico this year, is working, I think, to have the proper liquidity instruments on a global basis. I am absolutely convinced that all of our efforts, which I think are of a collective nature and also on an individual basis, will allow the Eurozone to recover the stability in the past and also have global economic prosperity, not only global, but regional as well. We're going to need a strong sense of determination, I think a lot of courage. We are going to have to use pedagogy to explain why we have to make certain decisions that have to be taken. And I think we are also going to have to use a lot of common sense. And I'm certain that this will not be missing. Hopefully, when you invite me once again, I can come back and tell you Europe is growing just as Mexico is right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I think we have seen such a demonstration of leadership, so we can only be encouraged that with such a leadership, Europe's problems will be solved. And let's not forget, Europe is a rich region. It's still the most important economic unity in the world, and I think it can continue to contribute a lot in the future to global cooperation, global growth. We had an opening session which touched upon many issues, but I think we dealt with all the key issues in a relatively short time. Very impressed by what has been done by pursuing the right policies in Mexico. We touched in a very, I would say, also emotional way on the issue of, I avoid the word drug war, but criminality, I should say, here in the region, or security. We looked at regionalization, very important. So I would like you to express our gratitude to the panelists this morning, again for your hospitality, Mr. President. I would integrate here particularly you, Governor of the region, and to thank you very much for the great evening you offered us yesterday. So I don't want to keep you longer from luncheon. Thank you again, Mr. President.